My Lords, I strongly support this set of amendments, and in particular 135HZE, which I think my noble friend was just about to wrap up on. Now, noble Lords will recall that I've been a councillor and have sat on our local planning committee for 23 years. I was leader for 17. So it was one of my privileges to actually appoint the committee and choose the chairman. And I always explained to my members what the purpose of planning was. And it wasn't an administrative function that existed as an end in itself, although sometimes this bill treats it as it is so. My Lords, planning exists to arbitrate between the private interest of the applicant and the public interest. And I use the word arbitrate purposefully, because people who sit on the planning committee have a difficult job. They've got to weigh up so much conflicting information within an adversarial system. Ultimately, the proposer wins or the objector wins. Now, much of this bill is established under the false premise that local planning committees are blockers of development, and the ranks of officials will not rest until every square inch of our nation is concreted over. But this is nonsense. I mean, the premise is that officials bring none of their prejudices to bear, and it's simply not true. We've got Natural England, who will leave no stone unturned in blocking development. We have the railways, who ballast every proposal with ridiculous costs. £5 million for a footbridge to cross between two platforms. We have the highways authorities that tie themselves in knots under the misdirection that personal transport outside development boundaries is unsustainable. And that's before we have all the other bad actors in many other quangos who increasingly are advancing their own narrow self-interests rather than the public interest. Now, I do not deny the importance of some of their representations, but the problem with all these quangos is they all claim a veto. It's their way or no way. And it's from these vetoes that we've got the £100 million bat bridge, of which I expect my noble friend Lord Howard may refer. It's from these vetoes that we get this sort of mitigating trade in natterjack newts or whatever. These organisms that are rare in Europe but commonplace in every English village pond. And of course the insanity of nutrient neutrality, as if building a bungalow in Bristol is going to somehow clean up the River Wensum. And so the way planning works, it only takes one of these vetoes from just one of the statutory consultees, in many cases to block the entire proposal. And it's especially the case when officers advise members to refuse an otherwise acceptable proposal on overly precautionary grounds, that an adverse decision could be grounds for appeal or expensive judicial review. So we need the planning committee to cut through the undergrowth, to stop them looking over their shoulder, to be fearful of challenge. And I congratulate my noble friend Lord Manor, who's not in his place, for his report, and he's made several recommendations. But those recommendations will count for nothing if there's nobody without the mandate and the duty and the courage to get those applications to committee. Now, in my experience, it's the committees populated by the accountable councillors that do more to get Britain building than the faceless, dead hand of the state quangos. So we need elected people who know a self-serving veto or spurious objection when they see one. We need people on the ground who know the importance of building homes, economies and places that enhance communities, to arbitrate between those competing interests. And that's why this amendment is so welcome and so necessary. It's absolutely right that the chair of the planning committee, working with the senior planner, should be able to revisit otherwise fatal objections to balance, to get that balance, to enable the local champions that populate those committees to take all the evidence into account, to listen carefully to objections, to balance that private and public interest, and to get Britain building, and not to pander to the self-serving quangos, sometimes only interested in pursuing their own ideologies to the exclusion of all else.